New York does not pause for grief. It does not pause for shock. It does not pause for the kind of cold that settles into a man's chest when the world rearranges itself without his permission. Rain hit the glass facade of the St. Regis like something desperate and relentless. The city beyond the windows was a blur of headlights and wet pavement. Inside, the lobby hummed with the soft orchestration of wealth, marble floors, crystal overhead, the low murmur of conversations that cost money just to be part of. Ji-sung Min-ho walked through that lobby like he owned the air inside it, because functionally he did. His charcoal suit was bespoke, cut to the precise geometry of a man who had never once needed to ask for anything twice. His jaw was sharp. His posture said everything his silence refused to say. He was the kind of man that rooms adjusted to, not the other way around. He was crossing toward the elevator bank, unhurried, controlled, every step deliberate. Then he stopped. Not slowed, not hesitated, stopped, completely, like something internal had seized without warning, like the circuitry behind his eyes had encountered a signal it was not built to process. Across the crowded lobby, near the far end of the reception corridor, she stood. Her hair was a crown of natural coils, full and unashamed, catching the warm amber light of the chandeliers above her. She wore a deep rust-colored coat that moved when she laughed, and she was laughing. Softly, genuinely, the kind of laugh that did not perform itself for an audience, the kind that just existed, unconcerned with who watched. Maya Jackson. The name did not form in his mind as a sound. It formed as a sensation, something blunt and sudden pressed behind his sternum. He had not seen her in 4 years. 4 years in which he had rebuilt every wall she had found a way through. 4 years of making himself into something colder, harder, more precise. 4 years of ensuring that the version of himself capable of being undone by another human being had been surgically removed and buried. He had believed that work was finished. He had been wrong. She was not alone. On either side of her stood 2 small boys, identical, 4 years old perhaps. They were dressed in matching dark coats. They moved the way boys that age move when they are comfortable, when they are safe, when the woman beside them is the entire perimeter of their known world. One of them tugged at her coat sleeve. She looked down, and her face did the thing it used to do. It softened, not into weakness, into something that required more strength than he had ever properly credited. Ji-sung could not move. That was the fact of it. Ji-sung Min-ho, who had built an empire on the architecture of composure, could not make his legs carry him forward or backward. He stood fixed to the marble floor while the lobby moved around him like water around stone. Then one of the boys looked up. It was not a dramatic moment. The child was simply scanning the room the way children do, curious, open, unguarded. His gaze swept the lobby and landed without ceremony on Ji-sung.
The boy had golden brown eyes. Ji-sung had golden brown eyes, not common, not the kind of detail that belonged to coincidence. His mother had called them the Min-ho mark, his grandfather before her, a genetic signature passed down through the line like a sealed document. The child held his gaze for a moment. Then, slowly, his small hand rose and tapped his left collarbone, twice, rhythmically. The gesture was unconscious, entirely without intention. Ji-sung's entire body went cold, because that was his gesture, his specifically, something he had done since childhood, when he was thinking, when he was processing, when the world was moving faster than he preferred. His own hands had done it 10,000 times in boardrooms and back seats and long silent nights. No one had taught him. It had simply always been his. And now, a 4-year-old in the lobby of the St. Regis was doing it without knowing why. The past hit him then, not as a memory, but as an indictment. His own voice, low, final, stripped of everything resembling warmth. "Get rid of it. I do not harbor a rival's blood." He had said those words. He had meant them in the moment, with the full weight of his conviction. He had watched her face crack at the center and told himself her pain was a confirmation of her guilt. He had turned away before she could speak another word. He had believed he was being rational. Standing in the lobby of the St. Regis, staring at a child with his eyes and his collarbone and his blood, Ji-sung Min-ho understood with devastating clarity that he had not been rational at all. He had been catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. Maya had not noticed him yet. She was handing something to the other boy now, something small and wrapped, and the child's face split into a grin that pulled at the corner of his mouth the way Ji-sung's own smile had once moved. She adjusted the collar of one coat. She said something quiet that made them both straighten up slightly, proud. She was raising them. She had been raising them alone for 4 years, in silence, under an alias if his intelligence had served him in the last decade. She had disappeared so completely that even his network, which reached into ports and terminals across 11 countries, had not been able to place her. Now, here she was, 20 feet away, with his sons. His. The word detonated somewhere behind his ribs. Maya turned her head then, not toward him. She was tracking the boys as they shifted toward a display near the far wall, but the angle of her movement opened her sight line toward the elevator bank, toward him. She saw him. The laugh evaporated, not gradually, instantly, like a flame pinched between 2 fingers. Her entire body changed register in the space of a single breath. Her spine lengthened, her jaw set. The softness that had lived in her face 30 seconds ago was gone, replaced by something forged, something that had been tested at very high heat and had not broken. She did not look afraid. She looked like a woman who had already survived the worst version of this man and made her peace with the wreckage. She looked like someone who had prepared, in the back of her mind, exactly for this possibility, and had decided long ago how she would carry herself when it arrived. Ji-sung took a step toward her. Maya did not step back.
It had not started in a lobby. It had not started with rain or silence or the sharp geometry of consequence. It had started in a conference room on the 41st floor of the Min-ho Group's Manhattan headquarters at 7:43 in the morning, before the coffee had been poured. Ji-sung had been sitting at the head of a table that stretched 12 feet in each direction. Around it, senior logistics directors from 4 divisions. The agenda was efficiency. The Min Ho Group's international shipping terminals had developed a routing lag that was costing the syndicate time. And time in Ji Sung's world was not abstract. It had a precise monetary value, and that value had been declining for 6 consecutive quarters. He had been told a consultant was coming in, independent, American, recommended by 3 separate port authorities across 2 continents, which was unusual enough to register, though he had not shown it. He had expected someone with credentials arranged neatly on paper and ideas arranged neatly in a presentation, and a practiced instinct to agree with the most powerful person in the room. Maya Jackson had walked in at 7:44, set a single printed document on the table without distributing copies to anyone else, and started speaking directly to Ji Sung, as though the 11 other people in the room were ambient furniture. She had not asked permission to start. She had not introduced herself with a list of her qualifications. She had simply said that the routing problem was not technical, it was political. That 3 terminal managers across the Atlantic corridor were deliberately throttling throughput to protect side agreements they had made with a competing freight carrier, and that fixing the software would accomplish nothing until those agreements were dissolved and those managers were removed. The room had gone very quiet. One of his senior directors had cleared his throat and begun a sentence about the complexity of the situation. Maya had cut across it without raising her voice. She had said that complexity was often the word people used when they were being paid not to find the answer. The room had gone quieter still. Ji Sung had looked at her for a long moment. She had looked back with the absolute patience of someone who was not waiting for approval and was not afraid of what happened if it was withheld. He had dismissed the rest of the room. They had talked for 3 hours. Not the way he talked in meetings, where the outcome was already decided and the conversation was a formality dressed as collaboration. They had actually talked. She pushed on things, he pushed back. She produced data he had not seen, from angles his own analysts had not thought to try. He produced context she had not had access to, and watched her rearrange her conclusions in real time without defensiveness. By the end of the 3rd hour, he had offered her a 12-month contract to oversee the full restructuring of the terminal network. She had asked for 18 months and an independent reporting line directly to him, bypassing the divisional structure entirely. He had said yes. He had not said yes to a demand like that in years. He was not entirely sure why he said it then. He had told himself it was because she was operationally exceptional. That was true, but it was not the complete truth. The complete truth was more complicated, and Ji Sung Min Ho had always had a talent for declining to examine complicated things too closely. For the first 4 months of the contract, they worked together in the structured, high-velocity way that the project demanded. She delivered. Every terminal she restructured moved faster. Every manager she flagged turned out to be exactly the liability she had diagnosed. His revenue figures in the Atlantic corridor moved upward for the first 2 years. His senior directors resented her quietly and said nothing to his face. She did not seem to notice or care. He noticed that she did not seem to notice or care. That was unusual in his world. People were almost always performing something in his presence: deference, ambition, fear. Even the ones who tried to project confidence were performing confidence. Maya did not perform anything. She simply was what she was, and let that be sufficient. It was the most disorienting quality he had encountered in another person in a very long time. The shift between them did not happen in a single moment. There was no obvious crossing of a line. There was instead a gradual compression of distance that neither of them narrated aloud. Late evenings reviewing terminal data, the point at which her chair had migrated from the far side of the table to the adjacent position. The night the power went out in the east wing of the office and they had finished a working session by lamplight without either of them suggesting they stop. He had told himself it was proximity, professional intensity, the particular intimacy of two high-functioning people solving problems together at velocity. Then one night in the parking garage beneath the building, she had said something that made him laugh. Not the controlled social response he deployed in meetings, an actual laugh, arriving before he had the chance to decide whether to permit it. She had looked at him with something that registered as surprise and something else he had not categorized quickly enough. He had kissed her in the parking garage. She had kissed him back, and everything that followed had been entirely private. Not hidden with shame, private with intent, removed from the syndicate world and the boardroom world and the world where people watched him for information they could use. Just the two of them in spaces that belonged neither work nor consequence. For 1 year, she had been the only person who moved through his life without a strategy, without an angle, without something she was trying to extract or protect.
He had known, in the quiet part of himself that he rarely consulted, that this was the most dangerous thing about her. He had kept that knowledge at a careful distance. He had believed that distance was sufficient.
The Minho Group's terminal network stretched across 14 ports on 3 continents. Most of what moved through those terminals was legitimate: agricultural equipment, consumer electronics, industrial components, documented, audited, precisely cataloged. Some of what moved through those terminals was not. This was understood without being stated. It was the architecture beneath the architecture, the financial layer beneath the financial layer. It was why the Minho Group occupied a position in certain conversations that legitimate shipping conglomerates simply did not. And it was why Ji-sung maintained a private security structure that operated parallel to the corporate one, answering only to him, moving without paperwork. Han Bin Chang had been watching this architecture for 7 years. Han Bin was not a loud man. That was the first thing people got wrong about him. They expected volume from a rival of his caliber. They expected the kind of aggression that announced itself. Han Bin was quiet, precise. He had built his own freight operation from a single cold storage terminal in Busan into a network that now rivaled the Minho Group in 3 of the 4 corridors that mattered. He had done it through patience and through an almost clinical attention to other people's weaknesses. He had been studying Ji-sung's weaknesses for a long time. The trap was not improvised. That was important to understand. It was assembled over weeks: logistics, personnel, timing. Han Bin had identified a window when Ji-sung would be traveling without his primary security rotation. A terminal inspection in Newark, low profile, private, the kind of visit Ji-sung made when he wanted to assess something without sending a signal to the people being assessed. Han Bin owned 2 of the security contractors stationed at that terminal. He had owned them for 14 months. He had been patient. The night Ji-sung arrived at the Newark terminal, the facility closed around him like a hand, not violently, smoothly. Doors that should have opened did not. Communications that should have connected did not.
The security detail Ji-sung had brought with him encountered complications in the outer corridor that were engineered to be resolving, but never quite resolved. And Ji-sung, with the particular pride of a man who does not allow himself to appear concerned, had not immediately called for escalation. That delay was what Han Bin had counted on. By the time Ji-sung understood the geometry of what had happened, he was isolated in the terminal's central operations room with a skeleton crew of 3 men whose loyalty he now had reason to question. His external communications were jammed at the building level. His car was in a lot that was now inaccessible, and the men Han Bin had stationed at each exit point were not the kind that responded to negotiation. Ji-sung sat at the operations console and thought through his options with the methodical calm that was either his greatest strength or his most dangerous illusion, depending on the night. The options were not good. Maya was not at the terminal that night. She was running a remote audit on the Rotterdam data from her own workspace, accessing the Minho terminal network through her private encrypted monitoring system, the system she had built herself as a condition of her contract, the one that gave her a live feed of throughput, access logs, and communication traffic across every terminal in the network. She saw the Newark terminal go dark at 11:47. Not physically dark, operationally dark. The kind of dark that did not happen by accident. The kind that meant someone had closed a fist around something. She ran the access logs. She ran the personnel records against the terminal manifest. She cross-referenced the security contractor rotation against the known structure of Han Bin Chang's private network, because she had built that cross-reference 3 months ago when she first noticed anomalies in the Newark staffing patterns and had not been entirely certain what they signified. Now they signified something very specific. Ji-sung was trapped completely, with no visible exit. Maya sat in her workspace for 4 minutes. The data was in front of her. The situation was clear. The outcome, if nothing intervened, was also clear. She picked up a secondary device that she kept off the Minho network, and she made a call. Han Bin answered on the second ring. She did not explain herself. She did not negotiate. She told him she knew what he had done, and she told him what she was willing to offer in exchange for Ji-sung walking out of that terminal before morning. Her proprietary encryption keys, the digital architecture she had spent 18 months building, the access framework that was at that moment the most sophisticated logistics security system operating in the Atlantic corridor. She offered it all without hesitation. Han Bin had been quiet for a moment. Then he told her to come to his estate in Westchester, and they would finalize the terms. She had already known before she made the call that it would not be simple, that Han Bin would not take the keys and send her home, that there would be a price structured to humiliate, to leave a mark that could not be explained away. She made the call anyway. She did not know, sitting in that workspace with the terminal data still open on her screen, that 1 week prior, during a quiet Saturday in Ji-sung's penthouse overlooking the harbor, a different kind of consequence had already been set in motion. Something cellular, something that moved below the level of decisions and data and strategic sacrifice. She did not know she was already carrying 2 lives that belonged to both of them. She closed the laptop, she put on her coat, and she drove toward Westchester through rain that had been falling all evening and showed no intention of stopping.
Han Bin Chang's estate in Westchester was the kind of property that announced restraint and meant the opposite. Stone exterior, iron gates, grounds maintained to a severity that suggested control extended outdoors as a principle. Inside, the furniture was minimal and expensive and placed with the precision of someone who understood that space, when emptied correctly, communicated power more efficiently than filling it. Han Bin met her in the main reception room. He was dressed as though the hour were reasonable. He gestured to a chair. He poured water into 2 glasses and set one in front of her without asking. Maya did not touch the glass. He looked at her with the particular kind of attention that was not admiration and was not threat. It was assessment, the way a person looks at something they are calculating how to use. He told her she had surprised him. He said that most people in her position would have done nothing, would have waited to see what happened and then made a decision based on whatever outcome served them best. He said what she had done instead was interesting. Maya said she was not there to be interesting. She was there to complete the transfer and leave. Han Bin smiled, not warmly, with the appreciation of a man who enjoyed precision and recognized it in others. He told her the transfer would take time to verify. He told her the encryption keys needed to be tested against his own system architecture before he could confirm their authenticity. He said this would require her to remain at the estate until morning. Maya said nothing. She had known this was coming in some form. She had already decided that the form did not matter. What mattered was the outcome. He showed her to a room on the 2nd floor, spare, clean, a single window that faced the grounds. He told her someone would bring her anything she needed. No one came. She sat in that room through the night without sleeping. She did not pace. She did not call anyone. She sat on the edge of the bed with her hands folded, and she thought about what she was doing and why, and she arrived at the same answer every time she completed the circuit. Ji-sung was going to walk out of that terminal in the morning. That was the only answer that mattered. Han Bin was not going to hurt her. She had understood that from the moment she made the call. His objective was not her suffering. His objective was the encryption keys, and beyond that, the image, the narrative. Ji-sung receiving the surveillance footage in the morning and constructing a story from it. That was the real instrument. Not the keys, though he would certainly use those. The real weapon was the interpretation, the thing Ji-sung's pride would do to the incomplete picture. Maya understood this. She sat in the spare room on the 2nd floor, and she understood it completely, and she still did not leave, because the alternative was a man she had shared a year of her life with. A man who carried something inside him that she had never fully described to herself, but had always known was real, being quietly eliminated in a Newark terminal for reasons that would never be publicly explained.
She could not make herself choose that outcome. At 6 a.m., Han Bin's assistant came to the door and told her the transfer had been verified. She was free to leave. She drove back to the city as the light was changing, gray and silver and thin, the kind of morning that has not decided yet what it intends to become. She stopped at a pharmacy on the Upper West Side because she had been intending to stop for a week and had not, and the thing that had been sitting quietly in the background of her attention had been sitting there long enough. She sat in her car outside the pharmacy for 20 minutes afterward. 2 lines. She looked at the result with the absolute stillness of someone receiving information that reorganizes everything. Both of them. The lines were unambiguous. She turned the test over. She turned it back. 2. because the ultrasound would come 3 weeks later, and the technician would say that word with careful professional neutrality, and Maya would sit in that paper-covered chair and feel something vast and wordless move through her that she would not be able to name for a very long time. But that was later. For now, she sat in her car in the pale morning light with the pharmacy bag on the seat beside her, and she thought about what she had done the night before and what she was holding now, and she felt the two things exist in the same moment without resolution. She drove to Ji-sung's penthouse. She did not yet know what she was going to say. She knew only that she needed to tell him what had happened, that she needed to explain, that whatever his reaction was, she was going to face it directly and without apology, because she had made her choices with her eyes open, and she would continue to. She took the elevator up. She did not know that Han Bin's message had already arrived, that the footage had already been delivered, that Ji-sung had already been sitting in that penthouse constructing the worst possible interpretation of everything she had done and finding that interpretation entirely convincing. She stepped through the door, and the look on his face told her that the conversation she had prepared for was not the conversation that was about to happen. Ji-sung had received the message at 5:17 in the morning. It came through a secondary channel, the kind of routing that bypassed his standard security filters, which meant it had been sent by someone who knew his architecture. That alone should have given him pause. It did not. Or rather, it did, and he overrode it, because the footage on the screen was doing something to his capacity for measured analysis. The footage was time-stamped, precise, security camera quality, not a phone recording. The angle was exterior, the gate of Han Bin Chang's Westchester estate at dawn. The image was clear enough. Maya walking out, unhurried, her coat from the night before, a car waiting at the curb, engine running, as though the departure had been anticipated and arranged. Ji-sung watched it once. He watched it again. The message that accompanied it was brief, 6 words. Your logistics expert handles beautifully. No signature, no explanation. None was needed. The footage was designed to speak for itself, and it was doing exactly what it had been designed to do. Ji-sung set the tablet down on the penthouse console and looked at the harbor through the floor-to-ceiling glass. The water below was dark. The city was still mostly sleeping. The light at the horizon was the color of something unresolved. He thought about what he knew. He had been trapped in a Newark terminal. His communications had been cut. His security detail had been neutralized by contractors who, he now understood, had been working against him for over a year. Han Bin Chang had orchestrated the entire configuration with a patience and precision that Ji-sung could analytically respect even now, even with everything else he was feeling. He had been completely exposed, and then, at some point in the night, the situation had resolved. The doors had opened, the communications had restored, his car was accessible. He had driven back to the city without explanation for why the trap had released him when it should have tightened. He had assumed a miscalculation on Han Bin's part, a security breach in the opposing operation, something that had gone wrong for Han Bin and had worked in Ji-sung's favor. He had not asked more questions because he was relieved to be out and had allowed that relief to occupy the space where analysis should have lived. Now he sat with the footage on the screen, and he could see, in retrospect, the shape of what had actually happened. And he was building a story from the shape, and the story was the one that Han Bin had architected for him to build, piece by staged piece. And Ji-sung did not know this, because the version of himself capable of that particular humility had been buried years ago. Maya had been at Han Bin's estate. Maya left at dawn. Ji-sung was released in the night. The geometry seemed self-evident. The conclusion seemed to assemble itself without his involvement. He was not a man who permits himself to be saved by anyone. The concept was already a violation of something core. But to be saved by this particular exchange, this particular arrangement, this particular night, that was a different category of violation entirely.
He did not ask himself whether he was thinking clearly. He did not ask himself whether the footage was curated. He did not ask himself what it might have cost her to make the call she had made. He did not ask because he was already in the grip of the thing that had always been his greatest liability, the absolute certainty of his own interpretation, the pride that had no mechanism for being wrong. He told himself he was being rational. He told himself this with the full authority of a man who had always been told he was the most rational person in the room. The elevator in the penthouse signaled an arrival. Ji-sung did not move from where he stood. He let her come to him. He let the distance between the elevator doors and the spot where he was standing be the full length of the penthouse, so that she would have to cross the entire room with his silence filling every step. Maya came through the doors. She saw his face, and whatever she had been preparing to say shifted behind her eyes into something else. Not fear, recalibration. The look of someone who has walked into a weather system they did not anticipate and is adjusting the approach without showing the adjustment. Ji-sung looked at her. He said nothing. He let the silence do what silence does in the hands of someone who has practiced it as a tool. Then he picked up the tablet from the console and turned the screen toward her. She looked at the screen for a long time. The footage played. She watched herself walking out of Han Bin's gate. She watched the car at the curb. She watched the timestamp. She looked at it all with the focused attention of someone working through a translation and arriving at the meaning. Then she looked at Ji-sung. His face was the face she had hoped never to see directed at her, composed on the surface, with everything underneath it running cold and conclusive. The face he showed to people he had already decided about, the face that closed before the argument could begin. She told him she could explain. He said he doubted it. She said she needed him to listen before he made a decision. He said he was listening. His voice was level, controlled. The control was the most frightening part, because it meant he was not in the heat of something. He had already moved past heat into something colder and more final. She told him about the terminal, that she had seen it go dark in her monitoring system, that she had cross-referenced the contractor rotation and understood what was happening. She told him she had called Han Bin directly. He said nothing. She told him about the encryption keys, that she had offered the entire proprietary framework in exchange for his release. She told him Han Bin had required her to remain at the estate until the transfer was verified. She told him she had been in a room alone all night and walked out when morning came, and it was done. She told him none of it was the footage implied. Ji-sung looked at her for a long moment. Then he asked her what happened at the estate. His voice was quieter now, and the quiet was not gentleness. It was the quiet of a man who has already made his judgment and is offering the formality of a question. Maya felt something shift inside her. not collapse, calcify. The particular hardening that happens when a person realizes that the truth they are telling is not the problem. The problem is who is receiving it. She told him nothing happened at the estate. She said it plainly. He looked at her with eyes that had already closed their internal doors. And she realized that she was about to say something else, something she had been holding since the car outside the pharmacy, something that had been sitting in her chest all morning, waiting for a moment that was not this moment, but that was arriving anyway, because time does not wait for better circumstances. She told him she was pregnant. The room changed. Not physically. The harbor was still outside the glass. The penthouse was still silent. But the quality of the silence changed into something pressurized and total. Ji-sung looked at her, and she watched him do the calculation. She watched it happen in real time behind his golden brown eyes. She watched him take the timestamp from the footage. She watched him place it against the date she had just given him. She watched him construct the arithmetic of it and arrive at the conclusion Han Bin had built the entire operation to deliver. His jaw tightened. His voice dropped all the way down to the register he used when something was finished. He said, "Get rid of the pregnancy. I do not harbor a rival's blood." The words entered the room and remained in it. Maya did not cry. She had thought she might, and she did not. What happened instead was quieter and more permanent. Something in her understanding of who this man was completed itself and settled. She had loved him. She had made a sacrifice for him that he would likely never comprehend. She was carrying children that were entirely, exclusively his. Children who had his eyes and his gestures and his blood. And he was looking at her and telling her to eliminate them. She thought about what would happen if she corrected him, if she told him the arithmetic was wrong, if she showed him the timeline and made him understand. And she realized, standing in that penthouse with the harbor gray behind the glass, that correcting him would not make the children safe. It would make them valuable to him. And valuable to Ji-sung Min-ho was not the same thing as safe. Valuable meant leverage. Valuable meant watched. Valuable meant raised inside the architecture of a world that had already tried to eliminate their father once and would try again. She looked at him. He looked at her. She made her decision. She did not argue. She did not explain further. She did not make her case one more time with different words in hopes that the result would change. She had seen Ji-sung's decision-making to know when a door had closed. It had closed. She had watched it happen. Maya reached to her wrist and removed the silver bracelet. He had given it to her 7 months into their relationship, an heirloom piece, old and heavy, engraved on the interior with a character she had once asked him to translate, and he had said simply meant continued. She had worn it every day without thinking about it. She had not been wearing it as a symbol. She had simply worn it because she liked the weight of it. Now she held it for a moment. Then she set it on the stone floor at her feet. Not thrown, set, deliberately, with the precision of someone returning something that no longer belonged to the moment. It made a clear, small sound when it landed. Ji-sung looked at it, then at her. She looked at him once more, the kind of look that does not ask for anything and does not offer anything, and simply records.
Then she turned and walked to the elevator and pressed the button, and when the doors opened, she stepped inside and let them close. She did not look back. The rain from the night before had stopped. The pavement was wet and reflective, and the city was waking up around her in its ordinary, enormous indifference. She walked half a block before she stopped and stood on the sidewalk and let herself feel for exactly 1 minute the full dimension of what had just happened. 1 minute. Then she began to think about what needed to happen next. The next 4 years moved in a tempo that had its own logic. Not fast in the way people imagine survival to be fast, all urgency and crisis. Fast in the accumulating way, the quiet velocity of a life being rebuilt, one deliberate choice at a time. She relocated, not impulsively, carefully, with the same precision she brought to everything operational. She had built enough of a professional reputation under enough layers of project-based work that she could operate under a secondary professional identity without breaking anything that mattered. She settled in a city that was large enough to disappear into and connected enough to work from. She took contracts through a logistics consulting firm she built quietly, small, clean, precisely managed. No syndicate-adjacent clients, no shipping networks that overlapped with anything Min Ho or Chang. She had the boys in a hospital where no one knew her full name. The moment the nurse placed them against her, both of them at once, she understood something that she had not been able to access before through all the calculation and composure and deliberate survival. She understood the size of the things she had protected.
She raised them with the same quality of attention she brought to everything, present, consistent, demanding in the ways that mattered, and gentle in the ways that were necessary. She was not performing motherhood. She was simply doing it, the same way she had always simply done the things she decided to do, without narrating it or waiting for recognition. They were extraordinary. She knew parents said this about their children, and it was usually sentiment. In this case, it was observable fact. They were sharp and quick and curious and stubborn in a way that she recognized from 2 directions at once, which sometimes made her laugh in a private, complicated way when they were not looking. They had golden brown eyes. She did not think about that too much. Ji-sung, in the meantime, did what Ji-sung did. He built things. He expanded the network. He added terminals in 2 new corridors and restructured the Pacific operation in a way that doubled throughput within 18 months. The industry publications covered it the way they covered natural phenomena, with the understanding that you could document it but could not fully explain it. He was richer. He was more powerful. He was, by every external measure, at the peak of what he had set out to become. His senior directors noted that he had become harder to read, that the controlled quality he had always carried had deepened into something more total, that he operated with complete precision and zero apparent interior life. They said this among themselves and not to his face. He did not sleep particularly well. He did not examine why. He did not look for her. He told himself this was because she had made her choice and he had made his, and that was the complete account of what had occurred between them. He told himself this consistently for 4 years and became very skilled at believing it for stretches of time that could last for weeks. Then the St. Regis happened, and everything he had told himself was standing in a lobby 40 feet away with 2 pairs of golden brown eyes.
Maya held his gaze across the lobby with the patience of someone who had been preparing for this encounter for 4 years and had decided that when it came, she would not flinch. Ji-sung walked toward her. He moved through the lobby the way he moved through all spaces, with the absolute authority of someone who had never had to negotiate for room. People adjusted around him without knowing why. He reached her in 12 steps and stopped 2 feet away and looked at her, and then looked at the twins who had now turned around, because children always sense when the energy of a room has changed. The boys looked at him with the open assessment of 4-year-olds encountering something unfamiliar. No fear, no recognition, simply the wide, honest attention of children who have not yet learned to guard their curiosity. Ji-sung looked at them and said nothing. His face had gone through something rapid and visible that he could not fully suppress. The control was there, but it was working harder than usual. The jaw was tight, the golden brown eyes moving between the 2 boys with an expression he could not name and could not conceal. Maya told the boys quietly to wait with the concierge for a moment. She said it in the tone she used when something was not optional. They went without argument because they understood that tone. Then she turned back to Ji-sung. He asked her where she had been. She said that was not what he actually wanted to ask. He looked at her for a moment. Then he asked about the boys. She said she was listening. His voice dropped. It was not the cold register from 4 years ago. It was something raw beneath the control. He asked her whether she had kept Han Bin Chang's lineage alive, whether the children that he could see with his own eyes were the product of what he had believed for 4 years they were. Maya stepped forward, into his personal space, close enough that the lobby noise fell to background, close enough that this was a conversation no one else was going to hear. She told him that Han Bin Chang never touched her. She said it plainly, without drama, without the emphasis of someone who expects to be doubted and compensating in advance. She told him about the digital key transfer. She told him she bypassed Han Bin's security systems using a data manipulation protocol she had spent 6 months building as a contingency against exactly the kind of move Han Bin made that night. And then she told him about the timeline. She told him precisely when the children were conceived. She gave him dates. She gave him the arithmetic that Han Bin's curated footage had been designed to corrupt. She let him do the calculation himself in real time, and she watched his face while he did it.
The lobby continued around them. Crystal overhead, marble below. The ordinary, expensive motion of people with no idea what was being reconfigured in the center of the room. Ji-sung worked through the numbers. She watched the exact moment he arrived at the answer, the exact moment the architecture of 4 years of conviction encountered the unarguable geometry of the truth. She watched it move through him like something physical, not a thought, a seismic event. He looked at her. She looked back. She told him that the boys he had ordered destroyed were his only heirs. She said it without bitterness, without satisfaction, without performing any of the anger she had kept compressed for 4 years, because she had not gone through everything she had gone through to arrive at this moment and perform it to anyone, including him. She simply said it, and then she let the silence hold it. Ji-sung's face drained of its color in a way she had never seen happen to him before. Not fear, not guilt, something larger than both. The particular devastation of a man who has just understood the full scope of his own catastrophic error,
who has seen in a single clear moment the thing he threw away and what it cost, and that he threw it away himself with perfect, arrogant precision. He opened his mouth. He closed it. He looked toward the concierge desk where the boys were standing. One of them was watching a decorative display with interest. The other was looking back at them with the uncanny patience of a child who knows something important is happening and is waiting to understand what it means. The boy tapped his left collarbone. Twice, rhythmically, without knowing why. Ji-sung looked at his son, and whatever remained of the version of himself that had believed he was right for 4 years dissolved completely in that moment, without ceremony, without a sound. He did not fall to his knees. Ji-sung Min-ho had never fallen to his knees in his life, and this was not the moment that changed that. But the devastation was present in him in a form that she had never seen before, and that was in its own way more total than any physical collapse. He was about to speak. She could see the words assembling, the beginning of something that was going to cost him more than anything he had said in years, and that he was going to say anyway, because the alternative was standing in this lobby indefinitely, while the full weight of what he had done continued to press on every surface of him. Then the lobby doors locked. Not loudly, the soft mechanical click of security hardware engaging at every exterior entry point simultaneously. The kind of synchronized precision that does not happen by accident and does not happen for benign reasons. Maya heard it. Ji-sung heard it. Around them, 2 or 3 hotel guests who had been moving toward the exit slowed, confused, pulling at handles that had stopped responding. Ji-sung's eyes moved, not toward the doors first, toward the perimeter, the trained sweep of a man who has operated in dangerous environments long enough that threat assessment happens before conscious thought. He saw his security detail across the lobby shift into a tighter formation. Their eyes were already on the exterior. 3 vehicles pulled up against the wet glass of the St. Regis entrance. Black, long, luxury town cars with the particular stillness of vehicles containing people who have been waiting for the exact right moment and have just been informed it has arrived. The doors of the cars opened, not broken open, opened, because the man who had caused them to be unlocked specifically for his arrival, and that kind of coordination was itself a message, precise and deliberate, and designed to communicate that what was happening had been planned for long enough that even the doors had been accounted for. Han Bin Chang walked into the lobby of the St. Regis. He wore a dark suit, no crimson lining. He did not need the signature. He was the signature. His hair was perfectly arranged. His expression was the expression of a man attending a long-scheduled appointment and finding everything in order upon arrival. He was smiling, not warmly, with the particular quality of someone who has been patient for 4 years and has found that patience entirely rewarded. He looked at Ji-sung across the lobby. Ji-sung looked back. The space between them was approximately 30 feet of marble floor and 4 years of accumulating intention. Han Bin's eyes moved to the boys at the concierge desk. The assessment lasted 2 seconds, no longer. Then he looked back at Ji-sung, and the smile adjusted in a way that meant something specific. He had known. He had known about the twins. Maya understood this in the same moment Ji-sung did. Han Bin had tracked her. Her digital footprint, however carefully she had managed it, had been somewhere in his architecture.
He had been monitoring, waiting. He had known the twins existed, and he had known what they were, and he had waited for the moment when she and Ji-sung occupied the same space again. He had waited for exactly this. The moment when Ji-sung had just learned the truth, and the weight of it was still fresh, and the armor was still recalibrating. That was the moment Han Bin had walked in for.
The lobby had gone very quiet. Not silent. The ambient sounds of the building continued. The climate system overhead. The distant sound of an elevator arriving on another floor. The soft mechanical hum that underlies all large, expensive spaces. But the human noise had stopped. The guests against the walls. The staff behind the desk. The security personnel holding their positions. All of it had arrived at the particular stillness that precedes something irreversible. Ji-sung stood in the center of the room. Han Bin stood 40 feet away. Between them, the lobby. Behind Ji-sung, his security detail. 4 men, positioned without being instructed to position themselves because they had been with him long enough to read the architecture of a situation. They knew they were outnumbered at the exterior. They knew it. Ji-sung knew it. The calculation was the same for everyone who had done it. Han Bin spoke. He did not raise his voice. He had never needed volume. He said that he had waited a long time for an occasion that brought everyone relevant into the same room simultaneously. He said this with the measured appreciation of someone who had engineered the occasion and was permitting himself a moment of acknowledgement before the next phase. He said that he knew about the boys. He said that he had known for some time. He said the timing of this particular evening had not been accidental, that he had been watching Maya's digital movement for 18 months, patiently, the way you watch something you intend to use. That when she had reconnected, however briefly, with any system adjacent to the Mino network, he had known. That this meeting at the St. Regis had appeared in his intelligence 3 days ago, and he had arranged everything around it accordingly. He said that Ji-sung's heirs were at this moment the most useful pieces on a board that Han Bin had been setting for 7 years. Ji-sung said nothing. Han Bin continued. He said that the dissolution of the Mino syndicate was always his objective, not its acquisition. Dissolution, complete and total. The removal of the Mino line from every corridor, every terminal, every arrangement that the name had secured over 3 generations. He said this with the flat patience of a man reciting a plan rather than revealing one. He said the boys were the lever. He reached into the interior pocket of his jacket and removed a small device, flat, black, no larger than a lighter. He held it up between 2 fingers without ceremony, the way someone holds a key. He said that what he was holding would cut all building communications, external and internal, for the duration of the next conversation. He said this was a courtesy. He said it gave Ji-sung the opportunity to make a decision without the distraction of third-party involvement. He pressed it. The device emitted nothing visible, no sound, but the hotel manager behind the desk looked at his phone, and the look on his face changed. 2 of the staff reached for landlines that had gone dead. The interior security guard spoke to his radio and received no response. The lobby was sealed, completely, from everywhere. Han Bin's men at the perimeter positions took 1 step forward, coordinated, rehearsed, the step of people who have drilled this exact sequence and are now executing it for the first time with an audience. The step was toward Maya, and toward the boys at the concierge desk. Ji-sung moved. Not toward Han Bin. He turned and he crossed the lobby in 8 steps, and he placed himself between Han Bin's men and his family. He did it without announcement, without a word directed at Han Bin, or at his own security, or at anyone. He simply moved to the position that mattered and stood in it. Maya looked at him. She had the boys close to her now, one on each side, her hands on their shoulders. They understood that something serious was happening. They were not crying. They were watching their mother to read the situation. She was keeping her face steady for them. Ji-sung stood facing Han Bin's advancing line. Han Bin observed this with what appeared to be genuine interest. He said that was touching. He said that 4 years ago, Ji-sung had not considered the boys worth protecting, and that it was notable how quickly the calculation had changed. Ji-sung quietly said that Han Bin should make his offer. Han Bin smiled. He said there was no offer. Offers implied that Ji-sung had something Han Bin wanted enough to negotiate for. He said what he had instead was a set of conditions, that the Minho Group would begin a structured transfer of all terminal contracts within 60 days, that the legal framework for dissolution would be initiated within the week, that in exchange, Ji-sung and his family would be permitted to exit this lobby and continue their lives in whatever reduced and private form they chose. He said the alternative did not require elaboration. The lobby held the moment. Ji-sung stood in front of his sons. He had not looked at them since he turned. He was looking at Han Bin, at the men behind him, at the device in his hand, and the sealed doors beyond, and the impossible arithmetic of the room. He had built an empire. He had built it over a lifetime, with precision and sacrifice, and the absolute conviction that the things he was protecting were worth protecting. He had been wrong about what those things were. He understood that now with a clarity that would have been useful 4 years ago, and was arriving 4 years too late. He had sent away the most important things he had ever had. He had done it with the full force of his certainty, and it had cost him 4 years, and the first years of his sons' lives, and the complete interior life of the woman who had, at genuine personal cost, kept him alive so he could stand in this lobby, making this calculation. The alarm system in the building found a way through the jammer, a single emergency circuit, hardwired independent of the digital network, a redundancy no one had accounted for in the planning. It began to sound, low and rhythmic, echoing through the marble and crystal of the St. Regis lobby. Han Bin looked toward the ceiling. A single flicker of something crossed his face. Not alarm, recalculation. Ji-sung looked at Han Bin. The alarm continued. In the lobby of the St. Regis, with his sons behind him, and the doors sealed around them, and 4 years of consequence pressing on every surface of the moment, Ji-sung Min-ho stood his ground. The screen went black.